Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Barely Crafting or something. I ended up having beta access, and I don't really know when that happened. I just found it in my Battle.net launcher. But I thought, like, hey, there are still a couple of days before Dragonflight launches. Not much to do, and I'm a bit curious about the professions. So I'm gonna go in and check out how professions work and fiddle around a little bit with them and maybe see, like, what's the plan. So while doing that, I thought I also might record a video on just like explaining the stuff that has changed now in Dragonflight, because there are quite a few things that has changed in how they work, and it can look a little bit intimidating at first. I know some people in the Discord has said that they are sort of like thinking of opting out because it looks a bit complicated, and I don't necessarily think it has to be complicated. So if you really want to like be a blacksmith instead of just like going double gathering, hopefully I can like talk you through it and like show how it actually works and stuff like that, right? It's not going to be any spoilers in this video. I'm just going to stand around here in Stormwind where they have added all the, profession trainers and stuff, so we don't have to go into actual Dragonflight. Perhaps you will see a new mount or something, but more spoilery than that, this should be stated out of this video, right? Also, I won't really deep dive into any profession specifically. I'm mostly talking about like how the general professions have changed, because a deep dive is something that I simply lack the knowledge of. I will, however, link to a couple of content creators either in the comments or in the info box below. Content creators that I know has done some really good deep dive videos, but they are like 30-40 minutes long, so depending on how interested you are, I guess. And knowing myself, I aim for 50 minutes, and this is probably going to be 40, so stay with me, I guess. Let's take a look at a couple of professions then. I have picked up two professions here for us to look at. So I picked up blacksmithing and I picked up mining. So let's take a look at each of them, but we're going to start off with the blacksmithing one, because that is the more complex, I would say, profession, since you are crafting things, while the gathering is a little bit easier since you are mostly focusing on gathering. If we pick up the UI here, you can see that my UI is pretty large. We can adjust the size of it with an add-on called Bliss Move, which can be pretty handy at times. I mostly downloaded it so it would be a bit easier to watch on the video. At a glance, we can probably see here that the UI has changed quite a bit, and there are a couple of key elements to it that we will go through one by one. But before we look at the UI, there are two basic things for professions that I need to talk about. Things that are very important to understand how they work and what use they have. So first off, you see that I have a blacksmithing skill now of 7 out of 100. And while that works in the way that it always has since the early days of vanilla, where it limits the amount of recipes that you can learn. So like if I only have skill 7, I wouldn't be able to learn a recipe that requires skill 10. That is actually not the main thing what skill does anymore. So instead what skill does is that it tells the game, or tells you, how well you will be able to craft a certain item. So we can see these plate bracers here. They are currently at 306. And depending on how good of a blacksmith we are, we would be able to craft these exact same bracers up to a total skill of 316. So we can get an extra 10 item levels if we are very skilled in our profession, right? There are different ways that we can acquire this skill, and one of them is through the next system they have added called knowledge or specializations. So down here at the bottom you can see that I have a grayed out tab called specializations, and in this you will be able to choose a path that you want to focus on. So for example, for smithing, it could be like, do you want to be an armor smith or do you want to be a weaponsmith? And then each of those have different things that they can dive into at the start. So maybe you want to be a weaponsmith, but you will also focus on axes, and then you can become an axesmith. And being an axesmith will give you extra blacksmithing skill, especially when you're crafting axes. But you won't get that skill when you craft, for example, a pair of plate bracers. And we're gonna look more at the specialization in just a bit, but let's take a look now at the UI. So in the UI, we have 3 different new things that are important to understand. So first off, we have our materials over here. We have 3 empty boxes up here, and then we have our crafting details down here. So let's start with the crafting details, because that is what's going to tie the other 2 into the whole system. Here we can see that we have a progress bar, and we have one button here and 2 buttons on the side. And this is a meter showing us how well we are crafting this item. As I said, we are currently crafting these as a base level of 306, and that is because they are rank 1. If we hover over the button here on the left, we can see that we have 5 different ranks that we can craft, each of them increasing the eye level of the item. And to get all the way to the highest level there, 316, the game tells us that we need a recipe, or we need a skill of 40 to get there, and we currently have a skill of 7. The skill of 7 almost puts us into the second tier, but not just enough. So we need to bump our skill a little bit more in order to get here. And there are basically a couple of different ways where we can bump our skill. So first off, we can just make more items, and thus we will increase our base skill. However, 100 is not the highest skill required to craft recipes. So you will have to acquire skill outside of, the normal blacksmithing skill. And one of those ways is crafting, for example, a blacksmithing hammer. So here we can craft ourselves a hammer, and that ties into these 3 slots at the top. So these are 3 profession item slots. So as a blacksmith, you will have your hammer. You will also have a leather apron, and then you will have a third one that I actually don't know what it is. And for some professions, they can craft 1 or 2 for themselves, and some professions need to buy theirs from others. For example, a miner can't make their own mining pick. They need to get a mining hat from a blacksmith, and a mining pick from a blacksmith too. And then the third one for miners might be like a pair of leather gloves, if I remember correctly. But there are different stuff that you can get there, right? And looking here at my bags, I made a few hammers in the past, and here we have 3 different hammers. So if you look at these, you can see that they have, can I increase this? No, I couldn't. They have different skills at the top. So this one has 58 resourcefulness, 58 multicraft, and 58 crafting speed. And we're going to look at all these stats in a little bit later, but these are basically, your crit, versatility, and mastery, but instead for your crafting professions. So we're just going to equip this one with crafting speed at the start, because it doesn't really impact anything right now. And we look at more of a deep dive on those systems later. But we can also see that it gives us +6 in blacksmithing skill. So while I'm going to equip it up here in a second, we can now see that with these plate bracers, we are almost on a level to increase to level 2, right? If I now equip this hammer, we can see that I went ahead of level 2, and we are now almost halfway to level 3. So what does halfway mean? Does that mean that you have a 50-50 chance to craft either of those? And no, it doesn't. It basically only shows you how close you are to being able to upgrade. And how close you are can be very important to understand, because maybe there is something that we can do in order to nudge it just above into the next sector, right? And these plate bracers, they used to be 306, but now if we hover over them, they are instead 308. And how now can we then get into this next level? And the way we can do that is tied into the crafting resources. So we see here that we have the Primal Flux. That is just something you buy from the blacksmith. It only has 1 rank. And then we have 2 different types of ore. And you can see that they have the same symbol here as these craftable items have, right? And everything that is equipable have a total of 5 ranks, as we have on this these plate bracers. And the ranks increase the item level that the finished product end up being. Everything that is not equipable, so that is both, mineable or gatherable resources, but also stuff that you can make as a middle requirement. So for example, as an engineer, you usually use ore to create cogwheels, and then you use the cogwheel to create maybe the pair of plate bracers or something like that, right? And those cogwheels will also end up having 3 different quality ranks. What the quality ranks does is that they give us an extra free skill point. So currently on rank 1, we are now here on this level. But if we would take here and we would instead of using 3 level 1 ore, we end up using 3 level 3 ores, we can see here that we are bumping our skill up towards the next level. We didn't get really there. We are still lacking a little bit, and that's when we can maybe increase the other ore too. And now we can see that we are now up crafting guaranteed level 3 of this item. However, we can't do much right now. Like if this is how we want to craft it, we can't actually really at the current progress into level 4. But we are part way into level 3, and that's a little bit of a waste. So if we go back here into the ore, we can see that we also have level 2 and we still have level 1s. And here we can try to find some type of combination of these ores where maybe like we just get into 3, but we don't waste any type of resource, right? So here we can see like if I put it like that, so we are using half level 1, we're using 25% level 2 and 25% level 3. We are now just edging slightly over the limit to be able to craft level 3, thus making this as cheap as possible, but still guaranteeing to be a level 3 craft. So now if I craft this pair of bracers, they should end up being level 3, which is 310. And there we have them. We have a level 3 bracers. And yes, so level 3 bracers. Alright, so I went to the vendor and cheated a little bit. I bought myself some blacksmithing skill, and we can see here now that I'm capped in the amount of blacksmithing skill I can get from blacksmithing alone. So I have a total of 100 out of 100, plus the 6 here, so a total of 106 that I get from my hammer. And now we're going to look at the second system, which is really the more fun part of all the professions this time around, and that is the specialization system. And you will see here that I put some stuff into specialization already, so let's just ignore that for a bit. But here at the top we have 4 different specializations that we can focus on. So we have armor smithing, weapon smithing, specialty smithing, hammer control. And these will be unlocked for the first one you get access to when you are level 25 in blacksmithing, 50, 75 and 100. So you will be able to unlock all of these over time, but just unlocking them does not give you the full benefit. So you can see here that if we look at armor smithing, we have a tree that is attached to it. So if I unlock this specialization, I can now talent into different things. So the first one is basically just like, if I take this one, we will be able to like get more bonuses when we craft armor. But then we can focus on fine armor, sculpted armor, and large plate armor. So large plate armor here, for example, that is shields and legs and chest pieces, while the sculpted here is shoulders and feet, for example. So here you have to like choose, what do you want to be? Like, do you want to make shields? Maybe you're a warrior and also want to make shields for yourself, or do you want to like make the different items? And someone who's really good at making, like has talented into large plate armor and maybe here then also talented into shields, they will get more bonus skill when they are crafting those items. So someone who is able to someone who is talented all the way down here will be the only one who can make the top end shields. And the way you talent into this is through the knowledge points that we talked about before. So knowledge points, you can see here that I have a total of 82, and I have bought some from the vendor, and the extra 2 here is from the items that we have crafted this far. So we did 1 craft of the blacksmithing hammer, so the first time bonus is 1 knowledge point, and we also crafted the plate bracers. So from the recipes we have thus crafted, we have gained a free 2 knowledge points. You will also be able to do quests and weekly activities to earn some more knowledge points over time. So in a certain amount of time, I'm not sure if we are talking 3, 6 or 9 months, we will be able to gather enough knowledge points to unlock everything. So you are now the full blacksmith, right? But now at the start, you will have to focus. So what do you want to do? And for me, on this character, I choose here that I want to be an axesmith. So you can see here, first off, I picked up weaponsmithing at the start. So when you get these, you can unlock these without actually using any points. So these are only tied to your skill. If you put 1 point in, that costs. But you can unlock all of them if you like. But if you want to specialize into them. So what I did here is that I put 10 points into weaponsmithing. So why did I put 10 points? And here we get to the talent wheel. So for each of these blobs or nodes here, we get some type of bonus. So the first one is here that we can use optional reagents when we're crafting weapon plans. That basically means that we can slot in more stuff. See, do we have a great axe? So here we have the optional reagents. We can infuse it with power, for example, to craft it at the mythic item level or something like that. And we can also customize our secondary stats and do some funky things. On the next one, we get inspiration. We haven't really talked about the stats yet, so just leave inspiration for now. But here, when we get to the third node, we are now allowed to learn a sub-specialization. And the 2 sub-specializations that you could choose between is making blades, so that would be, swords, warglaives, I guess goes on that, daggers, or we can make hafted weapons, which is hammers and axes. So when I put 10 points into this to get here, and then I choose to not put more points into this main one, but instead keep going into hafted weapons. And the same here is that now we can use optional reagents for hafted weapons. We get some inspiration when we make hafted weapons, and now we can learn a sub-specialization of hafted weapons. And that's when I went to axes. So now we can put more points into axes specifically if that's what we want to do, which also picks and polearms also goes under axes apparently. So that is how you talent in and become specialized in something. And I think this system makes crafting and all professions a lot more interesting. It also means that you don't really have to be too scared about the complexity in a way, because once you have talented into being an axesmith, you can't really compete with people making breastplates. Sure, like you can make some basic green breastplates for yourself or like to sell in the auction house, but when someone is looking to buy, they want the epic quality breastplate. As an axesmith, you won't be able to make that. Instead, you will have a certain amount of items, so like probably a one-handed axe, a two-handed axe, a pickaxe, and a polearm. That are the items that you are gonna be making at the start. So you don't really have too much items that you have to focus on, which is actually kind of nice considering how much they have changed the entire system. Alright, I jumped a bit ahead and put more points into our axe specialization. So now we are almost at the end here, and now the question is, how do we want to continue? So the last node here in axe specialization, what it basically does, it just allows us to freely repair our own axes and polearms if we use that. And that doesn't really sound too interesting to me. It sort of sounds like something you put towards the end when you don't really know where you're going to spend your points, right? The thing that it does is it gives you 5 more points in just crafting skill for specializations. But we could also put that here, which will unlock more resourcefulness and also help us get towards the next sub-specialization. But what did I get when we put in the points here, right? So we started off here learning the Primal Molten Great Axe. When we put another couple of points in, we get 5 bonus skill points. So first off, we get 5 points just going to the node, right? For every point we put into this wheel, we get 1 skill point. And when we hit this node, we just get a flat 5 extra on top of that. When we got to the third one, we learned to make the Cascarite pickaxe. So now we can make a really good pickaxe, which we'll look in a second. We'll get more skill, and here we learn to use finishing reagents. And finishing reagents are really important, because if you want to make the heroic or mythic raid item level quality weapons, you're gonna need to use finishing reagents. So now we have unlocked our potential in a way as an axesmith. And as I said, we are now getting a lot of bonus skill points being an axesmith. And we can see that if we go back here. So if we choose the Primal Molten Great Axe, we can see our skill is 172. However, if we look at a pair of plate bracers, we are only 107. So there we have, 65 roughly skill points that we are getting from, being an axe specialized smith. And that means that other people won't be able to make. First off, they don't even know the recipe for this one. Secondly, even if they could find another recipe that they would be interested in making, they would not be able to make it at the same level, because we can see here that we are already making this on level 3 simply because we have enough skill. And to get to level 5, we still would have to invest more points. And that's when we come back to the specializations, right? Say that you really want to be able to be really good at this weapon. Then you want to have the recipe difficulty to craft it at the highest level. And when we start to infuse with, these items, we will be able to see this one. It increases the recipe difficulty by 50, but you will now craft the items between 408 up to 418, which is Mythic raid quality level. And we are not there yet. So if we want to get there, if we want to become the greatest axesmith on the server, we now need to focus more on being an axesmith. And that's when we go back to the specialization. So here we can, for example, then put in more points into this tree that just increases our hafted weapons, right? So if we put more points into this, we will get more resourcefulness, and we will learn a new sub-specialization. We don't have to actually activate this right now if we don't want to, but just the points in here are giving us more skill. So we can see here at the Great Axe, we were now 172. And if I apply these points, we should be getting 10 extra skill points. Yeah, so we are 72 to 82. So we're now 182 instead, and we are progressing to be able to make the absolutely best type of stuff. To be able to do this, I would suspect that you probably need to fill out your gear slots and stuff like that, which we're currently not really looking to do here on the beta, but we could that if we wanted to. So here it kind of becomes sort of a strategic thing. How do you want to spend your points? Do you need more skill points in order to craft the epic or heroic level or raid level access, or don't you? Let's say we will reach our goal. So at some point we're going to reach our goal being we can now craft the highest level mythic raid level axe that is possible to craft. Then we don't necessarily need to focus more on axesmithing, right? So then we can either choose to opt into, being also a really good hammersmith, because we already have points put in here in both hafted weapons and weaponsmithing. So not putting points or going for blades, we're sort of wasting what we have here in the hafted. So maces and hammers is probably the next node you're going to look to go into. You could, I wouldn't recommend it, just start to unlock, for example, being able to make shields. However, there is a lot of points you're gonna need to put just to be able to get into shields that are sort of wasted that we already have for free. So I would say it's better that you are looking to, if you need a shield for yourself, buy it from another smith and compensate that by selling a really great hammer to someone else, more than making up for the cost of buying the shield from someone else. We could, instead of going into maces, actually dig even deeper down in this node, but not in the way that you might first suspect. So here we can craft pickaxes, right? And what we can do then is that we can go into speciality smithing and put points in here, because what we're now doing is we are focusing on non-martial goods. So that's basically, your sharpening stones and your tools for crafting professions. And if we go into toolsmithing here, we will now be able to increase our item level on the tools that we're crafting. So if that is the second thing that you want to focus on, compared to like also making the greatest access, you now also want to make the greatest tools. This can be a good sub-specialization to keep going into. You could also go into hammer control. So hammer control is basically just made around the concept of being able to make stuff for cheaper. So if we go into here, let's take this cascarite pickaxe, right? This one will cost 100 severite ore. And we see that we have a stat here called resourcefulness that gives us a chance to make this item. So like you will always have to put in 100 severite ore, but you have a chance to proc a situation where you get a reduction on that. So you use fewer regions when you are lucky to get into this skill. So that's one way, right? Because now you can make your access. The first thing that you want to do here is that you want to put points into this branching down in towards great access in a way where you're now able to craft the absolutely highest item level axe the game can offer. So that would be 418. Because it's going to be those axes that are going to be worth the most to craft for people. The people are really going to look to get. You're not going to be able to sell a bad mythic axe because everybody will rather turn towards the crafter that are able to craft a really good mythic axe, since it's going to be a very heavy investment, right? And you rather pay another extra 10% in order to get free 10 item levels instead of someone who is pretty okay at making mythic raid level axes. But let's assume that you get there. You are now absolutely maxed out in being an axesmith, and there is actually no real reason for you to delve down into access any deeper than that, or maybe not even a possibility. Maybe you have put, because these are all giving us skill, right? So we're gonna just assume here that we are putting all the points into this tree. So now we have the absolutely highest skill to be able to craft access. So where do you go from here? We have a couple of different ways that we can go. So we have a total of 60 points here invested into hafted weapons. So the very reasonable way to go would be to also become, really good at making maces and hammers. And hammers here also means blacksmithing hammers, for example, right? So because you're now getting a lot of free points going into this way. You could, for some reason, like if there's a reason on the market, maybe nobody's playing with hammers, everybody's playing with long blades or something like that, you have also a free 30 points invested into weaponsmithing. So it's a pretty decent way to go down any of these sub-specializations. However, going into armor smithing now, I would say is a pretty big waste, and I wouldn't recommend it, because to get to, just being a shield specializationist, you would need another 60 points in these talents here to be equal to like how good you would be at maces. And very likely that's going to put you very far behind everybody else. You're not really going to be able to compete, and not being able to compete means that you don't really can earn any money on it. But there is another way that you can go that's a bit interesting, and that's these two specializations up here. So speciality smithing is basically focused on making non-martial goods. So that we mean tools, alloys, sharpening stones and stuff like that. And since we're a weaponsmith, we are making the pickaxes through this specialization, right? And here we can focus on toolsmithing. So now we can be extra good at making, proficient tools to make the absolutely best pickaxes possible. This also combines if we further then want to go into maces and hammers, because it will also impact our blacksmithing hammer skill. So that would be a good way to go. We can also choose to not really branch out more and instead focusing on hammer control. So hammer control is about making things even more economical. So there is we have talked a little bit about the different stats that you can have, but here you get a stat called resourcefulness, which we will find soon somewhere. We'll look into that in a bit. But basically, resourcefulness is a chance when you craft an item to get a proc that returns a certain amount of materials to you. So if we look at crafting this cascarite pickaxe, we can see that it costs 100 severite ore, and we have 4% resourcefulness on it, or 3.3%, which means that we have a 3% chance to get a kickback, and maybe it only ends up costing us 90 severite ore or something like that, right? I'm not entirely sure exactly how much you get back or how much it costs. Maybe it means that you actually just get refunded all the 100. I'm actually not sure. I think I heard, though, that you will not be able to refund, bind on pickup stuff. So, for example, if we would put in this concentrated primal infusion to craft raid items, you can't get a resourcefulness proc on that one, because that is, one item that is sort of like limiting the amount of different stuff that you can make. And it would be a bit silly if you could return this. This is also bind on pickup, so it wouldn't really be returned to you. It would instead be returned to the player who ordered this from you. So yeah, that's a deep dive into the specializations. So let's take a look at how you actually can order bind on pickup items, because that's something that we have been looking at here. Cascarite pickaxe is bind on pickup. So does that mean that you only can make this for yourself if you also are a miner? No, it actually doesn't. All right, so one of the most important systems introduced when it comes to crafting in Dragonflight is the crafting orders. And the crafting orders is something that is important regardless if you're looking to get into professions at all or if you're going to ignore it, because it's very likely that you are going as a customer to have to interact with this crafting order system. And here on the beta, we have this dude we can talk to. I think this is going to be a station or some auction house type of thing in Dragonflight, but I haven't been to like Dragonflight on the beta, so not 100%. But here, this is the system where we order stuff from other crafters, because a lot of the things that are crafted in Dragonflight will be bind on pickup. So that means that you can't sell it on the auction house directly. You need to sell it through the system. And we are a blacksmith, as we've been talking about, and one of the things that we haven't been able to do for ourselves is a leather apron. So now we're going to go ahead and order ourselves a leather apron from a leatherworker and hope they craft it for us. So here under profession equipment, we can go in and we are looking for a blacksmithing profession equipment, and it's an accessory. So we're going to press on accessory, and here we can see that we have a toolbox that we can order from someone who can make toolboxes. I would suspect that's an engineer. And we can also make or order a blacksmithing apron. The green apron and the green toolbox are both bind on equip, so those we could go to the auction house. If someone is selling them, we can buy them directly there. But we are looking for a little bit better version. We're gonna make or order ourselves a blue apron, and that one is bind on pickup. So we click on this one and we end up here in the ordering menu. So this ordering menu is pretty easy to understand, but also a little bit complex depending on what you are looking for. So we have a button up here said track recipe, where we can just like in our quest log track the recipe requirements, because we have, as I said, two systems. We have the public orders and we have the private orders, or the personal orders. In the public order, you're basically, as the buyer, always supplying all the materials yourself. So you will here track the recipe, go to the auction house, buy all the materials, and that's what I have done now. And now we can send away this after we put in a commission. We can send this away to someone who will hopefully pick up this item and craft it for us. We can make a little note here saying, hey, thank you. Can you make it level 3 or higher? So that is a request that we can make, but we can't guarantee it. There's no way in the system where the person crafting it is prevented from crafting it on level 1. We can only like make a hopeful suggestion and hope it gets respected by whoever is crafting it, right? We can also press this view similar order buttons, and no orders found since it's beta, but we can see what the typical commission is, because a commission that is high is going to pick up a lot quicker than someone who is, only putting 1 gold. Because from the crafter side, they can only pick up 30 orders per day. So they are looking to maximize their profit, of course. If you are underpaying for the service, if you're only putting up, 5 gold, it's very likely that nobody's really going to bother, like capping out their 30 orders on your very non-existent commission. So here you can see a bit on what is a reasonable commission, what should you pay if you want this to be fulfilled quickly. So if this was a public order, we would just now press place order, and this will go out to the system, and then someone can pick it up. However, let's pretend that, as we said before, as we have seen in the blacksmithing, this item is 346, but we know from our own crafting that it can be higher if the crafter is good, and that's why we made the note, right? But for this item, we probably don't care too much. What we're really after here is the +6 in blacksmithing skill. And that one won't be affected by item level. It's only affected by, the tier of the material. So the green one is probably 4 or something like that. And the blue one is 6. And if there is an epic one, which I don't know, maybe that one is another 8 skill points or something, right? But let's say this is, a mythic raid item weapon. You're going to be very, not wanting to chance that item being either 408 or 418. You're going to look to find the crafter and maybe pay a little bit extra, but find a crafter that is guaranteed to make that on level 5. And that is where the private order or personal order comes in. So here, if this was an item that we really cared for, we could specify that we are going to send this to the person named Leatherholt, and we can again make a note if you want to, but here we wouldn't really have to make it 3 or higher. We can just say there is a minimum quality that we will accept for this order, and it's going to be level 5. But the thing is, how do you find this person? Very likely trade chat. So you're going to go to trade chat, you're going to type, hey, want to buy molten primal axe, level 5, and someone who is able to craft that level of skill is going to probably hit you up, hopefully, and you have to talk to them and agree on what the terms of the deal is. Because in public order, you are supplying all the materials. In personal order, you can do it either way. So maybe you say that, hey, I have a lot of arts and metal, so I'm going to supply those. But the crafter is supplying the other things. Or maybe, you are a skinner. So you have a lot of these scales and hides. So you are supplying them to the person and thus having to pay a bit less of a commission, right? Because you are supplying the materials. It could also be, you see that I have supplied level 1 adamant scales and level 3 stone crust hide. That the crafter you're talking to can only make a level 5 if you supply high quality materials, right? So maybe if you would supply it like this, the crafter wouldn't be able to make it on level 5, and then they can't they can accept the order, I think, but they can't actually create it if it's not guaranteed. But then in trade chat to the person you're talking to, you have to agree on what the terms are and what the commission would be. So let's say that the crafter is the one who goes to the auction house and buys the materials. They say that to make this item, you're going to have to pay me 5,500. So that's 5,000 for the materials and 500 for the commission for something, right? Then we can send it away and we can specify that the crafter has 12 hours. And the reason for that, is that maybe the crafter needs to have some time, go to the auction house, go out, farm some materials. But you also don't want to have the crafter, if you are supplying materials, you don't want the crafter to be able to, keep your materials hostage if they just log off and never come back or something. In the public order, if that's what we're making, we're now going to make a bit less of a commission because we are supplying the materials, and we're going to place this order. So now the order is getting sent away. You see that I already canceled one here before. We are sending away this order here, and now someone has 12 hours to pick this up. If a crafter sees this, so what that would be is, the crafter would then go to the crafting station, and then they can press crafting orders here under their own crafting skill. And then they can see their personal orders, and they can also see the public orders. So here, I wonder if someone has a crafting order for a pickaxe. No crafting orders here. And you can look through the recipes or search for something and see if you can find a crafting order that you're looking to fulfill. And here we have how many orders we have remaining that we can do per day. So you're gonna look to maximize this, of course, and yeah, it's gonna be an interesting, like if you're really good axesmith here, will there be 30 axes that you can make per day? Is there people buying that many? You're also gonna probably be, sitting in this one, refreshing it a little bit, because like if someone is buying paying 100,000 to have a smith craft them their mythic raid item level axe, you're really gonna want to jump on that order and snag that commission really, really quickly. Once you see an order pop up here, you can take that order. So what basically happens is that you are saying that I'm taking this order, and then you're booking it. So it sort of gets paused in the system. No other crafter can then come in and take that order from you during the time it's booked for you. I think the book is like 30 minutes or something like that. So during that time, that order is yours. If you don't fulfill it in that time frame, the order is going to be lost from you and again kicked up into the system for someone else to fulfill. But it gives you some time for like, you don't have to just like spam buttons through in order to get the good commissions. You can just like take the order, the commission is now booked for you. The only way that can be cancelled is if the orderer, the person who's making the order, actually goes in and like cancels the order. So if we go in here, we can see the order is listed. I think this status will change if the order would be taken by someone, and before it's crafted, I can actually go in here and cancel the order. So maybe it's like, oh damn, I actually don't need a flameproof apron. I had one in my bank. Then you can go in and cancel it up until the point it's crafted. So that is how you interact with that system. And to recap a little bit, the public order system is going to be great for stuff that you don't really care too much about the item level. Maybe your base set of gear, just starting out at 70. Some lower level profession tools, battle pets maybe and stuff like that. But for stuff that you really, really care about the item level, you're going to want to go private and find someone who can make it. Or if you have someone maybe this whack-a-halt that is a great axesmith, then you will of course not do it in public. You will just send it to that person in private, because there is no cap on amount of private orders you can fulfill. So as long as you have enough people who want to buy from you, you can do as many public orders or private orders as you want. It's only the public that are limited to 30. So that is how the system works. And we have two things that we're going to look at now before we end. And first off, we're going to look at mining and how it differs from a crafting skill. And we're going to look at the different stats and what they actually do for you. Before we look at the mining, let's talk a little bit about the stats, because understanding the stats is going to be helpful when understanding the gathering professions. So you're going to have two types of stats for professions. You're going to have your crafting stats and you're going to have your gathering stats, and those are going to be separated. But it doesn't really matter that they are separated, because even if you are, for example, a blacksmithing with miner, each profession is going to have its own gear, and it's mostly going to be the gear and the specialization that gives you the stats. So for example, on this one, we have a hammer here that is giving us crafting speed, right? But if we look at the Great Axe here, we're going to have three different categories. We have inspiration, resourcefulness, crafting speed, and we also have something called multi-crafting that we can't use on this specific item, so that is why it's not showing up. So let's talk about them one by one. Multi-crafting is something that's been in the game for a while. So Alchemy has had it for a couple of expansions now, and it basically means that when you're crafting one item, you have a certain chance to proc additional items being crafted. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to be in Dragonflight. In the past, for Alchemy, for example, there's been, a chance to get a multi-craft proc, but then you also had a chance to get additional 1 item, additional 3, additional 7, additional 10. So it's been a little bit different on how it's going to work, and I'm not entirely sure how that will function in Dragonflight. But still, if you're making stuff that is stackable, so it won't work on, access, gear, stuff like that, but everything that is stackable is something that multicraft will be really nice for. So imagine that you're making 20 potions and you're ending up getting 30 or 50 potions instead, right? Crafting speed is exactly what it says. You craft quicker. it's going to be absolutely worthless for everything that just craft some few items. So if you're an axesmith, for example, or if you craft armor, you're not going to really care about crafting speed. However, for certain professions, like especially at the launch, so an alchemist might be making 500 flasks trying to sell, and making them twice as fast might mean that you're spending 15 minutes making flasks instead of 30 minutes. I remember one time in I think it was the Shadowlands launch, I was a scribe, and I ended up making inks for scribing for about 3 hours straight. So had I been able to reduce that to 1 hour, it would have saved me a lot of time. However, I think this is mostly going to be good at the start, because at the start, everything, you're very limited in time. There are so many things that you can do and so little time. But when you're 5 months into the profession, if you're crafting, for an hour or two, just press it when you're AFK from the computer anyway, and doesn't really matter. Resourcefulness is basically reversed multicraft. So it's a stat that will work on stuff that is not stackable, which is sort of why it exists, I believe. So if we make this great axe, for example, resourcefulness is basically going to give us a chance to save some of the materials. So we craft this, and maybe we saved a certain portion of the materials didn't get used, so we made it cheaper. I suspect that multicraft is going to be the best one when it comes to making stuff that is stackable, and resourcefulness is going to be really good for stuff that is not stackable. All these three are pretty simple in what they actually do, and they say in the tooltip what your chance is. The only one that is a little bit complicated is inspiration. So inspiration basically means that you have a certain amount of chance to craft an item with a bonus skill. And as we talked about before, skill is what determines what level you're crafting something on. So currently, with the skill that we have, making this great axe, we can see here that I'm crafting this on level 3. And to craft this item on level 5, I would need a total of 300 skill, and we're currently 217. So we're lacking 83 skill to get to rank 5. If we hover over the bar, it says that to reach rank 4, we need 239 in skill, which is only 22 more than we have. And if we then hover over inspiration, it gives us a 10% chance to get a bonus skill of 50. So if we make a great axe and we have an inspiration proc, what does that actually mean for us? It means that we're gonna get the 22 we need to get into level 4, but we will not get the 83 that we need to get to level 5. So we will get into maybe somewhere around here for level 4. And that is where you need to calculate it every time and see what actually ends up happening, because there are some scenario where maybe you don't have too much inspiration skill, you're just into a little bit in level 3, and the inspiration skill will not get you all the way to 4. It will only get you almost on the way to 4. So basically you have a chance for nothing to happen, because it doesn't matter where you are on this bar, as long as you don't pass a checkpoint, you will never increase to the next tier. So for each item, you're going to have to calculate that a little bit. I have a suspicion, and something that I heard, in a comment, you should take this with a huge pile of salt, but that inspiration is going to be something that is really useful for example, alchemist, because potions, flask, and everything like that is also going to come in 3 different quality tiers, giving you more stats depending on how quality the potion is. So inspiration, it's a bit tricky to make money on it selling a great axe, because if you're selling this great axe, you can't really sell it like, hey, I can craft this for you and I'm gonna charge you 6,000 if it's a level 4 and 5,000 is level 3. It doesn't really work, especially since you go through the public order system when you make them, or private order system, right? Instead, inspiration, when you talk about alchemy, for example, if you make 100 flasks and you have a 20% chance to get an inspiration proc, and maybe that inspiration proc will get you from level 1 to level 3, there is a way where you actually can get a benefit selling those on the auction house. So these stats are going to be good for different professions. They're going to be good in different ways. And I think you, depending on what profession you are looking for, you should look to specialize in different, find gear that has the right stats and stuff for you like that, right? So that is how the crafting stuff works. So let's take a look at how the gathering stats working. All right, let's talk about the gathering stats. So we have 3 different ones. I wrote them in the chat because I haven't found a way in game to actually read what they do. But you have finesse, and finesse is pretty straightforward. It gives you a certain amount of chance to get more primary resources when you're mining a node. So when you hit a node, you normally get 1 or 2 ore. You now have a chance to get maybe 4 or 5 instead. Deftness increases your gathering speed, also very forward. If the mining node maybe takes 3 seconds to gather, now you can decrease it to 2.7, 2.5 seconds, and increasing your speed that way. I'm not sure how important that's going to be. To me, it sounds better to get more out of each node, but there is something I heard that if you gather with war mode on, you're gonna be able to gather special nodes that are only available for war mode and give certain bonuses. And I guess if you are PvPing, it might actually be good to have speed, so you can maybe stun someone, gather the node quickly, and then run off or something like that. Perception is your ability to get better or rare regions while you're gathering. So when you gather the basic nodes, so you have your basic ore, I think there are 2 types, but you also have a third ore that you are only getting as a proc. And perception is giving you the ability to get that more often, I should say. There's also something that's going to be very important for crafting, especially crafting the higher important items, like the epic items. And it's an item that is basically like primal infusions from Burning Crusade. So they're going to be, I think it's something like 8 different elements that we will be able to gather from. I know especially like the herbalism does this. I think all gathering professions can get them, and they are going to be really, really good. And I have my suspicion is that perception is going to increase the chance of you to gather those rare primal infused elements. I jumped over here to the vendor that on beta is selling these items directly, and we have these elements are very draconic. So we have the air, earth, fire, and frost, but we also have ire, decay, and order, which are not really like the typical elements, but these are the stuff of items that you're going to be able to gather through the gathering node. And I have my suspicion is that perception stat is going to increase your chance to get these items. I popped over here to the mithril order. I thought that was appropriate since we're going to talk about mining finally 40 minutes later. And mining specializations have 3 different branches, and let's go through them one by one. So mining process is basically very straightforward. Each of the sub-specializations here is focused on a certain of the stats. So you have finesse, where you get more stuff, and when you cap that one out, you're going to be able to get even more ore when you get a finesse proc. Serving is focusing on perception, so the chance to gather more rare materials, and the capstone ends here is that we will be able to find illimited diamonds when mining rich ore deposits. I'm actually not sure what diamonds is, but it's a diamond. I assume it's going to be pretty nice in some way, even if you're just selling it in the auction house. Industrialization is basically just increasing your speed, increasing your deftness, so the time it takes to gather, and the capstone is here that you have a chance to find gems when you mine stuff. Metallurgy is a bit of a weird and interesting one. So it's basically the smelting part of being a miner. So here in the base one, we can see here that we are learning how to refine draconium from level 2 to level 3 and refine cascarite to level 2, stuff like that. And then we can spec into severite and draconium, which are the two base those are the two base ores that we will find, and I think cascarite is the one that is a bit more rare that we will find in either of these two nodes. But if we go back to the journal here, so of course mining won't have a ton of recipes, but the recipes that we do have is that we have these refining recipes. So here we can take 5 level 1 draconium ore and turn it into a level 2 ore. And then we can take 5 level 2 ores and make that into level 3 ore. I'm not really sure how useful this is going to be, because that would mean that the level 1 ore needs to be more than 25 times as cheap as the level 3 in order for it to be worth to converting it. Maybe it will be. I actually have no idea how the value of the levels are going to be reflected on the auction house prices and stuff like that, right? But you can combine this with multicraft, which is going to be very interesting somehow, and resourcefulness. It's very possible, and it's very possible that you could go down the metallurgy track, go for the smelting part, talent or like gear into multicrafting a lot, and instead of it costing you now 25 level 1 to get to 1 level 3, maybe you will, with the multicrafting proc and resourcefulness and stuff, you will be able to make 10 level 1s into 1 level 3 or something like that on average. When talking about these stuff, it's always need like a really big sample size for it to average out, right? But it could be something here. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, because talk about it a little bit later. But we have the one that I'm most excited about, and that is mastering the elements. So as we talked about just a minute ago, we're going to be able to find these rare materials, right? And it's possible that the rare materials is only, cascarite, which is the blue ore. Maybe it doesn't really have any impact on the elemental stuff we can find. But here we can focus in the elemental stuff. So the first talent here is Overload Elemental Deposit. So basically when you find an elemental deposit, you cannot overload it for unique bonuses and effects. And I think that some way in these talents, you're also going to be spawning elementals that you have to kill. Not entirely sure exactly how that turns out. The big point here is that some of these pigs are are a bit larger. So here we can get more essences when we mine deposits. And here when we overload, you also gain a random rousing essence. And random is a little bit important here, because as a miner, we will primarily be getting fire and earth. Those are the ones that are attached to mining. So here we can maybe like focus on fire if that is interesting to us. And it reduces the amount of damage we take from molten deposits. So I guess maybe the deposit turns into a mob and hurts us, or maybe it just explodes or something. I'm not entirely sure. But we will reduce the damage we take anyway. We reduce the cooldown for our overload ability when we mine an elemental deposit, which is going to be really good because we want to overload as often as we can. And here, when we mine a molten deposit, we will basically get a short buff that will make us do fire damage on top of our normal damage. We have the earth track, which is basically working the same. We are now reducing our overload cooldown, and these two will stack. So if we go both this way, we're going to have 10% instead of 5%, I assume. And here we're going to get a shield when we mine earth stuff. Titan Touched is kind of cool, because when we spec into this one, we will be able to teleport to a nearby node, and then the first level is to teleport back again. So that's probably going to be pretty nifty. Outgathering is being able to teleport to a new node. We can reduce our overload CD again, so now we can be up to a total of 15% reduction. And mining Titan Touch deposits will now empower you, increasing your speed and secondary stats for a short while. So we have 3 different buffs depending on which of these that we focus on. Then the fourth one is called Primal. So here you have a chance to get Rousing Air and Rousing Frost essences, which are traditionally not found by miners. So we can now branch into getting stuff that are normally not what we usually get, which is kind of cool. We can reduce our overload CD even more, so now we're up to 20%. So I suspect that maybe like if we have all 4 of these, maybe we can empower, every 3rd node or something like that, every 4th node. And Primal Essences now also gives you spells and abilities to unleash a blast of damage. So it's just, the more elemental stuff that we gather, the more OP we get, sort of, right? So it's kind of a cool some cool mini games here during the gathering track. You will very likely be fighting elementals. That's at least what I remember from hearing other people talk about it. There is going to be some reason to do this while doing it in PvP, where you can find special types of ore if you do it in war mode on, and that's maybe makes the deftness or gathering speed a bit quicker. You like throw a quick kidney shot or something, gather the ore, vanish. Just leave the sucker there, killing the mobs that you have aggroed. It's gonna be some fun mini games with the whole everything. I haven't really looked into the gathering as deep as I have the crafting, because I don't want to go into Dragonflight and spoil the experience for myself. However, I have understood that if you go the skinning track, you will be able to make bait. And bait will basically spawn in certain mobs that are special for you. And when you kill them, you're going to get more material from those special mobs, right? So like mini boss, skinning bosses, I guess you could say. You're also going to be able to focus into butchery as a skinner. So like instead of focusing maybe more on the skins, you will be able to focus more on the meat side. So you can combine that maybe with cooking and sell a lot of food on the auction house. Leatherworking is also going to be able to focus into different things. So what they've done this time around is that you don't really just have like light leather or like draconic leather or something. You're instead going to have certain types of mobs drop certain types of resources. So if you're gonna be making a lot of mail type of stuff, or maybe your evoker, you're gonna be skinning a lot of scale type of beasts, because that is one going to be used for the mail. And maybe you need to find panthers or something to skin to get the leather. And there is quite a few, if I understood it, different types of resources that you get from different types of mobs out in the game. For the herbalism, they also have their own little mini game. They can also get the primal track, where they get stuff from looting primal herbs or something like that. But they will also be able to get seeds that they can find and plant in fertile soil that grows up, a sort of a bonus herb for them that gives them a bit more than typical. So all these things combined, and especially considering how the negative space in Dragonflight is made. So dragon riding is going to be a really important part, right? It's not just going to be run straight across this forest, gather nodes, fall asleep, watch Netflix. It's going to be very interactive. You're going to go up and down mountains. You're going to try to you're probably going to have to learn to dragon ride pretty well, because dragon riding is going to take you between the nodes a lot quicker. So if you fail your dragon riding and run out of energy, that's going to really slow down your gathering process. So optimizing your dragon riding is going to be a part of being a good gatherer. And that sounds really fun to me. There's going to be a ton of different things that's going to be kind of cool. So I hope you enjoyed this explanation. I hope it's made some sense. There are probably a lot better people to explain this to people. What I personally found is that I sort of been lacking this, walkthrough of how you create one item. What does the stuff do? The information is all out there, but it's sort of spread out, and I had to watch 10 videos to sort of understand how something works. So I hope I was able to make it sort of compact. I say that with a bit of a chuckle. I see that I'm now on video 11 or clip 11, so this is probably going to be a 40-minute video or something. Sorry about that. But yeah, and sadly we are not done yet. As you know me, or if you know me I should say, the crafting part is a part of the fun. But the selling part and the tactics and the meta tactics of selling stuff is something that I really enjoy. So I think I want to talk a little bit about my thoughts on that before we end up. If that doesn't interest you, feel free to skip the video here. Otherwise, we're gonna jump into that straight away. A really large change that Blizzard made here this fall, I believe, I wasn't playing when it happened, is that they changed how the auction house works in the background. And if you recently returned and just been playing the last couple of months, it's very likely that you haven't really noticed, because if you don't really know what to look for, it's not a noticeable change. But it is a change that's going to be very apparent now going into Dragonflight. And how it's been working before is that servers have been connected in clusters, and everything within the same cluster have shared an auction house. So depending on realm size, there have been clusters, like I think some servers are actually alone, possibly that Argent Dawn is alone, I'm not entirely sure, but some servers are connected in clusters. So usually like some medium and smaller servers, maybe a large server is connected in the same cluster. So before, you could make a weapon on Defias Brotherhood, sell it on the auction house, and someone on Earth and Ring, which is a connected realm, could buy that weapon. However, Terran Mill is not the connected realm to Defias Brotherhood and Earth and Ring, so nobody on Terran Mill would be able to buy that weapon from you, since they are not connected. And that is still the case. So the connected realms are still a thing, and they are connected and working the same way they always have for everything that is non-stackable. However, stackable items, for example, like mining stuff, herbs, ores, that is now region-wide. So all silver ore or iron ore available in Europe can now be bought on any type of realm. And this is going to be interesting, and I'm not really sure how this is going to play out. So the bonus of the system is that if you are out mining and you are putting up your herbs for, the lowest price that they are selling for, there are going to be so much stuff that is bought and sold constantly that you're going to sell stuff really, really quickly, except in a situation where maybe you are selling it for too high of a price or something like that, right? So stuff like that is going to change really heavily. And I also think that, if you are in a smaller realm, that might be a benefit, because now you don't have too much competition gathering the things. However, you are selling it on the Europe market, right? So selling stuff is going to be really, really quick for you, which would normally not be the case. However, the problem also has been that in the past, the larger realms has always pushed prices down because there are more people playing, more people supplying materials. So at the launch of Shadowlands, the price of some flower, I don't remember the names, Dreamfoil, for example, that would be higher on a smaller realm than it would be on the larger realms. And this time around, the largest realms are very likely going to push the prices down for the entire Europe market. So the bonus is that you're going to sell it really, really quickly. The negative is that maybe you won't get as much when you sell it on a smaller realm. However, weapons and equipable items, those are not region wide. So you will be able to go out and you will be able to go to the Europe region, buy the resources you need, and then make the weapon on a smaller realm where you don't really have that much competition. So if we take the largest server in Europe, Terran Mill, where all the the methods and those skills are playing, right? There are going to be a lot of tryhards trying to compete and making the best weapons to sell to the top-end raiding guilds. However, on Earth and Ring or a smaller realm, maybe there won't be that much competition. Maybe you will be 1 out of 3 really good axesmiths. So I think that can be a bonus if you want to go into the crafting profession side. But as I said, there's also a bonus if you go into the gathering side, because nothing is annoying as when you've been out for 2 hours gathering materials, you put it on the auction house and it takes 3 hours to sell. I did this on live servers, and yes, I made some potions, I put them in, I pressed, list, and they were sold. There's so many people buying, cheap stuff like food. It just instantly goes away. All of these changes ties into something called the shuffle. So shuffling is basically taking a material and converting it into something else that is worth more. So a couple of common shuffles that's been in the past is buying, buying cloth and thread from the auction house, make bracers and disenchant the bracers. And if the disenchanting mats is worth more than the bracers, you have now printed money. Or another version of it has been, that you buy the cloth for 5 gold, you buy the thread for 5 gold, and you make the bracers. But the bracers vendor for 13 gold. which means that every time you make a bracer, you're printing 3 gold from the system, which is really, really nice. You can basically just do that AFK, second screen while working from home or something like that. So there are a couple of these shuffles that's going to be interesting going into Dragonflight, because before, usually the big YouTubers and stuff find these shuffles on the larger realms where they are usually active. And maybe in your smaller realm, there are not as many dedicated crafters, so you could have a really good time doing these shuffles without the problem. However, it could also mean that, this time around, you're now competing against this shuffle with everybody in Europe, because the auction house is tied to Europe, right? So the reason I am talking about this is something I alluded to a little bit before, and that is down the metallurgy track. So metallurgy now for mining is basically shuffle. So you can take 25 level 1 ore and make it a 1 level 3 ore per standard. But you can also, talent into, or like build into multicraft and resourcefulness. So maybe you can get your conversion rate to be lower than that. And as long as your conversion rate is lower than the price difference between ore, so let's say that a level 1 ore sells for 1 gold and a level 3 ore sells for 20. As long as you have a conversion rate that is less than 1 to 20, you can now print gold with this shuffle. However, you're now competing on everybody else in Europe, and I don't know how that's going to pan out. There are 2 distinct possibilities, and one of them is that there are going to be a lot of crafters, or a lot, I'm not really sure, but there are going to be crafters that have 10 alt accounts. So they're going to park them in Stormwind, and if the shuffle is profitable, they're going to, do the shuffle on 10 alt accounts at the same time. And that might be more people that does a shuffle, the more prices gets pressed up, and the less value and profit there is in the shuffle, until the shuffle prices reaches a point where there is no profit anymore. And there are 2 ways here. Either there will be a lot of crafters doing the shuffle and the prices will basically go away, or there are not enough crafters doing the shuffle, and since for every crafting nerd out there with 10 alt accounts doing shuffles, you also have 1,000 normal miner gamers that are just flooding stuff in on the auction house. So it might mean that the profit is actually those dedicated crafter nerds are not going to have the ability to actually impact the market, because the market is now so big. It can go either of those ways, and I have no idea to how I should be able to figure out which one it is. One risk with this that I also want to warn about is that knowledge points are not refundable. Once you have spent knowledge points, you can't remove it. Even if you abandon the profession and pick it up again, your knowledge stays. So what that means is that if you level a character, you don't put in any knowledge points, you just save them for later. And on day 2 of the expansion, you see this video from someone saying that there's going to be this metallurgy shuffle is really good right now. So you rush to the auction house, you put in your points in metallurgy, and you start doing the shuffle. First hour, you earn 40k. Second hour, you earn 40k. 5 hours later, you're now down to 30k an hour. Next day, the shuffle is gone. Next day, too many people picked it up, and now you have your knowledge points invested into metallurgy, which basically means that when you go out mine stuff, you're not going to get very good profit because you have invested it all in here. And at that point, you might as well just abandon this and pick up herbalism, to be totally honest. The way I'm thinking about it personally is that I'm not going to risk this on my main character that I intend to play a lot. The character that you intend to play a lot, if you are looking to play more than one character, is the best one that you should have gathering on, because the one you're playing is out in the world where you're gathering stuff, right? So this might be something that I do on my 3rd alt, because my 3rd alt can be a miner. I'm not going to play it very much, and I can just log onto it during the shuffle while I'm having dinner, having a break or something like that, print some money. However, it doesn't really impact that character if that shuffle would go away, because I don't simply need to log in and do the shuffle then in that character. Instead, I'm out on my main character gathering gold or something like that, right? I can also, on the third character, I can also just abandon that profession and pick up something else that's looking interesting. So some food for thought, some meta tactics, and I think that's also something you should keep in mind for, overall choosing what profession you want to go for. If you go the gathering track, you're gonna put stuff on the auction house, it's gonna poof, disappear instantly. If you make something that is stackable, so alchemy, enchanting, I guess it's those two, those stuff will also sell really, really, really quickly. Doing crafting stuff that is armor or weapons is going to be a little bit more of a gamble, but also a lot more profit in is my suspicion. So if you end up, if you have figured out that, Prot Warrior is really looking meta right now, there are going to be a lot of Prot Warriors on launch, and you end up specializing in shields, and you are maybe, 1 out of 3 people on your connected realms doing that, it's going to be a lot of profit for you, because there are going to be a lot more than 90 people trying to buy shields. And since you can only do a limited amount of public orders, it's going to be some good deals to be made there for sure. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's not an hour or 2. I'm not really sure how long it ended up being. If you listen this far, why? But thank you. And also, have a really good Dragonflight launch. I'm really excited. It's just a couple of days away now. I'm really, it's going to be so fun. So fun. But yes, have a good weekend, and see you at Dragonflight launch.